I paid for my daughter's $250,000 wedding. She asked security to remove me. So I removed the money. The grand ballroom of the Hamptons Country Club was loud. A four-piece string quartet played in the distance. I stood quietly in the marble lobby. I held a wrapped gift. I wore my custom charcoal tuxedo. It was classic tailoring. It was not flashy. I'm 70 years old. A father should fade into the background on his daughter's wedding day. My biological daughter, Olivia, did not want me in the background. She wanted me erased. She marched into the lobby, her silk gown dragged across the polished floor. "Dad, what are you doing out here?" Olivia snapped, her voice hushed. Her eyes scanned my tuxedo with disgust. "You cannot be out here rubbing shoulders with Cameron's friends. You look outdated. It ruins the modern aesthetic." "I am waiting to walk you down the aisle, Olivia," I said quietly. Her manicured hand gripped her expensive lace veil. "You aren't walking me," she stated coldly. "David is." David was her mother's new husband. He was a loud plastic surgeon who leased sports cars he could barely afford. "I am your biological father," I reminded her. "And you are embarrassing," Olivia spat. "This is an elite $250,000 wedding. There are Instagram influencers inside that ballroom right now. I need everything flawless. Please, leave the venue before the professional photographer catches you ruining the focal shots." She was kicking me out of her own wedding because my tuxedo didn't fit her aesthetic. I stared through her shallow soul. 2 years ago, she tearfully begged me in my private study to bail her out of $60,000 of credit card debt. I wiped her slate clean. She convinced herself her financial survival was a miracle. She forgot the miracle was merely my checkbook. "Leave, Dad," she barked, pointing toward the glass doors, "before David comes out here and has security escort you off the property." I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't beg for my rightful place. I turned on my heel. I gripped the wrapped gift in my right hand. I walked out of the lobby and stepped into the scorching afternoon sun. I didn't call her mother. I didn't call the venue manager. I opened my encrypted banking application. Olivia thought I was just an outdated relic who handed over trust funds. She entirely forgot that I spent 40 years as the chief liquidator for Vanguard's corporate restructuring division. I didn't just quietly attend elite weddings. I secretly funded every square inch of them. My name is Richard Vance. I do not play golf. I do not brag about my stock portfolio. My professional life has been governed by silent, absolute fiscal control. When a bloated startup required restructuring, my firm took over. I would walk into a boardroom, seize the operational ledgers, fire the incompetent board, and liquidate their failing assets. I know exactly how to strip a man of his entire perceived value with minimal effort. Right now, the most overvalued toxic asset in my portfolio was my own daughter. I walked toward the valet stand. I handed the attendant a $50 bill. He sprinted to retrieve my vintage Porsche 911. I sat firmly in the driver's seat. I closed the heavy car door. Olivia and her pretentious groom, Cameron, loved to project the illusion of generational wealth. And Cameron called himself a serial tech founder. It was a polite term for a man who burned through other people's venture capital. This majestic wedding was built on a financial bluff. To spare Olivia the embarrassment of a cheap wedding, I established a restricted joint checking account 8 months ago. Every single vendor, from the elite catering team to the exotic florists, had been secured using an American Express Centurion Black Card tied exclusively to my private holding company. I told Olivia this was a family wedding fund. Because she was shallow, she assumed family fund meant she was spending Cameron's non-existent tech money combined with David's leased wealth. I was the phantom foundation holding up her fake existence. My fingers hovered over the screen of my smartphone. I bypassed the biometric protocol. I navigated to the master authorization controls for the American Express corporate account. The The vendor payments were held in temporary escrow. The final authorization sweeps were legally scheduled to trigger when the reception dinner commenced at 6 p.m. Olivia just informed me that my presence ruined her aesthetic. She believed her elite wedding was guaranteed. The liquidation protocol was required. I selected the master hold button. I bypassed the secondary warning prompts. I didn't just pause the primary vendor payments. I initiated a maximum security fraud and revocation clawback. I froze the black card. The financial guillotine was released. Now, I merely needed to wait to watch the blade hit the marble floor. Olivia's arrogance was not a sudden mutation. It was a calculated consequence of festering entitlement. She internalized the belief that extreme wealth was an unconditional birthright, requiring zero basic respect or genuine gratitude. 6 months prior to this wedding, I politely drove her to her bridal fitting on Fifth Avenue. I specifically requested that she maintain a reasonable budget for the silk gown. I wanted to see if she respected the financial parameters we discussed. When the designer brought out the invoice, it was staggering. The custom gown was priced at $35,000. "Olivia," I whispered, pulling her aside near the mirrors, "this is wildly beyond the architectural budget. We cannot justify this expenditure for a dress you will wear for 6 hours." She glared at me with absolute contempt. "Cameron's friends are all old money aristocrats, Dad," she hissed. "Do you want me to walk into the Hamptons looking like a cheap bargain bin bride? Put the card down and stop embarrassing me. You have zero idea how modern elite society operates." She believed she was educating me on wealth. She convinced herself my cautionary advice was just the irritating noise of a poor man. I looked at the active transaction monitors glowing steadily on my phone screen right now. I maintained total viewing permissions on the wedding master ledger. I executed a real-time refresh. The screen proudly displayed a fresh pending charge from the venue's master bartender. Right before banning me from the lobby, she casually authorized an upgrade to the open bar. She ordered 8 cases of rare vintage champagne, simply for the aesthetic Instagram toast. The new invoice attempted to authorize $12,000. She continued to bleed my silent charity, expecting my invisible black card to magically absorb her ego. The zero temperature radiating in my chest finalized into unyielding ice. You do not kick your father out of a building that is capital secured. You do not disrespect the sole architect of your elite facade. The ambient noise of the Hamptons faded. The corporate audit was complete. The financial demolition had flawlessly begun. I reached for the Bluetooth interface mounted on my dashboard. I dialed a restricted number located in the financial district of Manhattan. The ring lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Vance Portfolio Management, Arthur speaking," the commanding voice stated. Arthur was 65 years old. He was a ruthless former corporate raider. He was my top lieutenant during my tenure at Vanguard. We spent 3 decades bankrupting arrogant hedge fund managers together. He possessed the morality of a hungry shark, and he was fiercely loyal to exactly one man on earth: me. "Arthur," I said quietly, "it's Richard Vance." "Richard," Arthur's voice warmed, "I thought you were walking Olivia down the aisle. Did the ceremony commence?" "I'm sitting in the parking lot," I replied smoothly. "Olivia requested my immediate exit. She stated my aesthetic is outdated. David is walking her." The silence from Arthur was professional. He knew what that terminology implied. The friendly banter ended. "What's the target?" Arthur asked, his tone turning into pure tactical steel. "The Centurion wedding account," I stated firmly, "and the dependent entity known as the Sterling Vance wedding reception." "Your own daughter?" Arthur asked. There wasn't a shred of hesitation in his voice, only execution calculus. "The joint account we established to quietly fund her delusion?" "Olivia and Cameron chose to publicly banish me from the venue simply to elevate a plastic surgeon," I briefed him. "They believe their financial security is unconditional. They believe I am an outdated ATM. I see, Arthur said simply. The coldness in his voice could have frozen shattered glass. What are my executive orders? I froze the primary black card authorizations, I commanded, staring at the country club doors. Execute an immediate fraudulent chargeback protocol on every single vendor associated with this venue. The elite catering company, the exotic florists, the 5-piece orchestra. Claw the security deposits entirely back into the holding firm. Due in full right now. I heard the rapid clicking of Arthur's mechanical keyboard. The revocation protocol will trigger an absolute default across the entire venue ledger, Arthur confirmed. The venue management software will red flag her entire event in approximately 8 minutes. The vendors will lock down. That is exactly the point, I said evenly. She claimed her new husband is elite. Let's legally test his equity. Burn the entire reception to the ground. Or Arthur. Consider it ashes, Richard, Arthur replied. The legal stop payment notices are transmitting right now. I severed the connection. I leaned back into the leather seat. 20 agonizingly short minutes crawled by in silence. The afternoon sun blazed over the Hamptons estate. The parking lot was filled with expensive European sports cars. Everything looked peaceful, but I focused entirely on the glass doors of the primary catering wing. Based on the printed schedule, they were preparing to enter the grand ballroom for the $150,000 reception at exactly 4 p.m. I watched the clock on my dashboard slowly hit 4:05 p.m. Suddenly, the heavy service doors on the left side of the venue slammed open. 3 angry men wearing crisp white chef uniforms marched out. They shouted at a distressed venue manager. A catering truck reversed into the loading dock. Workers began reloading perfectly prepared trays of expensive filet mignon and ice sculptures back into the refrigerated truck. The exotic florists followed. They were tearing down the $40,000 imported orchid archway, tossing the delicate flowers directly into the back of a dirty utility van. Inside the massive ballroom, the disaster was accelerating. Through the giant floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched the venue staff kill the main breaker. The central air conditioning abruptly shut off. The lavish chandeliers went completely dark. The professional photographer lowered his expensive camera, refusing to capture another frame. Influencer guests stopped taking selfies. A venture capitalist in the front row laughed nervously. Several older guests quietly stood up and moved toward the exit. The whispering started, low and sharp. It spread through the suffocating room like a virus as the string quartet packed their cellos into their hard cases. The financial poison had flawlessly reached the heart of the wedding. My private cell phone vibrated violently. The caller ID displayed Olivia's name. I let it ring 3 complete times to heighten her terror. I calmly pressed the green accept button. "Hello, Olivia," I said. My voice was perfectly flat. "Dad!" Olivia yelled. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear the faint sound of arguing, combined with the panicked hissing of Cameron swearing. "Dad, contact the bank right now. My joint wedding card is malfunctioning. We are standing at the entrance to the grand ballroom, and the venue manager locked the doors." "There is no malfunction with the banking servers, Olivia," I stated smoothly. "What the hell are you talking about?" she screamed. Her voice echoed with raw entitlement. "The floor manager just told Cameron that our master account is frozen. They said a fraud revocation was triggered. The caterers are literally driving away with our dinner. Fix it." "I triggered it," I said coolly. Deafening silence fell over the cellular connection. The loud shouting in the background seemed to evaporate. "You did what?" Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. "I securely logged into the Vanguard master terminal," I explained, treating her like a hostile asset. "I permanently deleted the vendor authorizations. I ordered my wealth manager to execute a devastating chargeback on every single penny associated with your artificial aesthetic." You can't do that," she shrieked. Her panic was absolute. Dad, we have 200 elite guests waiting. The AC is off. We have no money to pay this balance. You are ruining my special day. I am absolutely not ruining you, Olivia, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing low baritone. You stated I ruin your aesthetic. So I removed my aesthetic from the venue. Let David and Cameron use their wealth to open the doors. Dad, please, she begged. They are threatening to call the police on us for non-payment. You are trespassing on unpaid property, Olivia, I commanded quietly. Have a wonderful reception. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for her screams. I placed the cellular phone onto the passenger seat. The silence in my vintage vehicle felt serene. The emotional sting of my daughter's rejection dulled the moment I destroyed her aristocratic facade. Inside the glass lobby, unmitigated chaos erupted. Through the tinted windows of my Porsche, I watched the beautiful disaster unfold. Cameron, the pretentious tech founder, was shouting at the venue manager. He pulled out his personal credit card. He slammed it onto the reception desk. The venue manager didn't blink. He calmly pressed a finger to his earpiece, speaking quietly into his security radio. Hold the main exits. Verify 0 physical assets leave the ballroom. Then, the manager ran Cameron's card through the master terminal. The machine flashed a bright red light. It declined. Cameron's fake venture capitalist wealth was insufficient to clear a $150,000 debt covenant. Cameron grabbed his hair, his face turning pale. He shot a terrifying look of disgust directly at Olivia. He assumed he was marrying into massive generational wealth. He assumed Olivia was a loaded trust fund heiress. He rapidly realized he just bound himself to a broke, useless woman whose furious father held the executioner's switch. David, the flashy plastic surgeon, was trying to hide in the corner. He made 0 attempt to hand over his own leased credit cards. He loudly claimed his banking token was malfunctioning. Richard, my restricted phone buzzed. It was Arthur. Give me the metrics, Arthur, I commanded, staring unblinkingly at the glass doors. Her high-end societal facade is locked down, Arthur reported. The orchestra breached their contract and departed. The caterers repossessed the raw bar. The venue disabled the ballroom electricity. She is officially bankrupt on her wedding day. Excellent work, Arthur, I said softly. The trap is shut. It took her exactly 4 minutes to burst out of the heavy glass doors into the parking lot. She was dragging her $35,000 silk gown across the dirty, hot asphalt. The glossy elite bride aesthetic was shattered. Olivia was sweating, completely panicking, her expensive makeup running in dark streaks down her face. She desperately scanned the parking lot. She spotted my vintage Porsche. She sprinted toward my car, terrifying the nearby valet attendants. Dad! Olivia screamed, pounding her small fists against the thick driver's side window. She was practically hyperventilating. Dad, roll the damn window down right now. You have to fix this. I engaged the master power panel. The glass smoothly rolled down exactly 3 inches. I didn't open the door. I forced her to bend down to my exact level. My wedding is destroyed, Olivia shrieked, pointing a shaking finger directly at the venue. Dad, the band left. The venue shut off all the air conditioning. Cameron's tech investors are furious standing in the hot garden. You stole my wedding. I am completely aware of the legal status of the ballroom, Olivia, I replied, my voice carrying the temperature of a morgue. As the primary lien holder of the defaulted wedding debt, I legally initiated the financial clawbacks. You stole my day, she screamed, her voice cracking. You stranded us in front of elite society. And you humiliated Cameron. You never actively owned that wedding, I corrected her violently, cutting straight through her terrified social delusions. You relied on a fake checking account generated by my hard work. You lived in a synthetic social bubble. I reached out and popped it. Cameron jogged down the stone steps. He looked terrified. Richard, Cameron pleaded, pushing Olivia mildly aside to stare at me. Sir, please. My own cards were declined at the venue desk. My primary startup investors are threatening to withdraw my massive funding because I look insolvent. You have to fix this bank glitch. You cannot logically do this to our social lives." "There is no bank glitch, Cameron," I stated firmly. She insisted my presence ruined her aesthetic. The liquidation phase is active. Olivia grabbed her own hair in shock. She stumbled backward, leaning against the hot metal of a parked Mercedes to desperately keep herself from collapsing onto the floor. "You are a monster," Olivia whispered, tears of sheer rage and helplessness spilling from her bloodshot eyes. "You are my own father, and you ruined me just because I politely asked you to step out of the photo line." "I did not ruin you because of a photograph," I said quietly, the terrifying truth dropping heavily into the hot air. "I destroyed your fake social structure because you abandoned the only man paying for your existence simply because you felt entitled to my charity." I reached slowly into the side pocket of my heavy jacket. I pulled out a thick manila folder stamped with the Vanguard corporate seal. I tossed it out of the tiny window gap. It hit the hot asphalt at her feet. "Those are the financial transaction wipeouts," I announced coldly. "They clearly show the extent of your absolute failure. You have zero equity left. Your fake elite checking accounts are empty. Your credit score is destroyed. You are mathematically, legally, and entirely broke." Cameron slowly walked over to the folder. His shaking hands picked up the heavy documents. He rapidly scanned the front page, his eyes searching for the bank account balances he mistakenly thought his new bride actually possessed. He saw the red negative zeros. He slowly turned his attention to Olivia. The helpless expression on his face warped into pure disgust. "You lied to me," Cameron hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Cameron, babe, wait," Olivia stammered pathetically, reaching out a desperate hand toward him. I can fix this. I just need a tiny bridge loan from your tech guys. Just give me a few short weeks to hustle my father." "You're not an heiress," Cameron explicitly spat the terrifying words directly into her ruined face. "You were funded. You never actually had a trust fund. You foolishly pushed your primary investor far too hard." The betrayal in Olivia's eyes was magnificent to witness. The pretentious man she banned me for was brutally turning on her the second the deep financial well ran entirely dry. Cameron didn't hesitate. He didn't offer to stand by his terrified new bride in her dark hour. He bent down, pulled out his cracked cellular phone, and frantically ordered an Uber. "I'm going strictly back to my rented Manhattan apartment," he announced coldly, not looking at Olivia. "Do not attempt to call me. My corporate attorney will contact you regarding the speedy annulment paperwork on Monday morning." "Cameron, please," Olivia begged violently, grabbing his tailored tuxedo arm. He shook her completely off. He walked back up the stone steps to retrieve his luggage, completely abandoning her in the exact cold, heartless manner she banished me from the lobby 2 hours prior. David, the useless plastic surgeon, was backing his leased sports car desperately out of the parking structure to entirely avoid the angry catering vendors demanding payment. Olivia stood alone in the hot parking lot. She looked tiny. Her arrogant posture was slumped. The elitism that defined her annoying existence had been surgically amputated without anesthesia. "Dad," she whispered pathetically, falling to her knees on the hard asphalt. She clasped her hands together in begging desperation. "Please, I have nowhere else to hide. The vendors are locked down. Cameron left me. David ran away. I have zero money for a basic hotel room. Just unlock the black card, please." I looked down at the terrified woman crying on the pavement. I felt absolutely precisely nothing. "I am officially retired, Olivia," I said quietly, the authority in my voice permanently sealing her terrible fate. "I do not fund bankrupt liabilities, and I do not employ disloyal relatives." "Where am I supposed to sleep tonight?" she screamed wildly, the pure terror taking over her mind. "That is the harsh beauty of being elite," I replied coldly. You get to figure out those terrifying challenges entirely by yourself. Get out of my secure parking trajectory, now. I pressed the electronic master button. The massive car engine loudly hummed to intense life, vividly revealing the long, empty road back to Manhattan. Olivia knew the coldness in my tired eyes. She understood that begging was useless when facing a veteran corporate liquidator. She slowly hauled herself to her feet. She dragged her ruined $35,000 silk gown out of my active path. I looked up into the dark rearview mirror. Through the tinted glass, I saw her reflection shrinking. A bride standing entirely alone in an empty parking lot, abandoned by her high society husband. I watched her drop to her knees in the dirt. I pressed the accelerator. Reaching 70 miles per hour, the illusion faded entirely. Exactly 6 long months later, the stark winter had frozen the Hamptons social scene. The legal proceedings regarding the Vance wedding fraud revocations were conclusive. Olivia attempted to declare bankruptcy strictly to illegally shield herself from the furious vendors. Arthur's fleet of corporate lawyers crushed the pathetic motion in federal court in under 20 minutes. She was held totally liable for the remaining unapproved $50,000 cancellation fees. Cameron successfully finalized their annulment. He relentlessly proved the marriage was enacted under false financial pretenses, leaving her drowning in unavoidable legal fees. The offshore high society friends predictable abandoned her the split second her reputation tanked. David aggressively divorced her furious mother after his leased sports cars were repossessed. The last status report I received indicated that Olivia was working grueling 40-hour shifts as a low-level makeup clerk located in a rundown suburban mall. She was using every single exhausting paycheck simply to pay the brutal minimum interest on her personal vendor debts. She finally achieved her lifelong dream. She was undeniably recognized by the public. It was a brilliantly quiet Sunday morning. I was sitting comfortably on the leather chair in my private penthouse overviewing Central Park. Outside the reinforced windows, the elite city was profoundly peaceful. The memory of her arrogance was an erased, silent echo. The grand corporate ledger was perfectly balanced. I deliberately logged permanently out of the Vanguard master network. I closed out the blue command prompt. I locked my large computer system, stood up firmly, and walked down the long hardwood hallway to the bright kitchen to manually make a fresh cup of dark, robust espresso. Revenge is a notoriously messy business strictly for emotional amateurs. For a seasoned corporate liquidator, it is simply a matter of identifying the corrupted internal asset, isolating the dangerous social liability, and calmly demanding the outstanding principal. I watched the silver espresso machine boil quietly on the expensive stove. No one was screaming inside my massive skyline penthouse. No one was arrogantly demanding my quiet capital. I stopped funding her illusion, and my life is blissfully quiet.